This is a historical story set in Virginia in the year 1958. Mildred, a young black woman, appears troubled as she informs Richard, her partner, that she's pregnant. To her surprise, he is overjoyed by the news. The next morning, they do some Fast and Furious, but make it 50s. The cars go so fast at 20 miles per hour as they race. Afterwards, Mildred and Richard kiss and some white boys stare. Later, he takes her to an acre of land he purchased and promises to build a house there. Mildred excitedly shares the news with her sister, who is thrilled to hear it. Richard also tells his friends about his decision, though some express mixed feelings. A few days later, they bring Mildred's father as a witness and travel to Washington, D.C., where they get married. Richard Loving is a white construction worker and an engine enthusiast who lives comfortably among the black community because he loves their seasoned food. His mother, a midwife, assists in delivering many babies in the area. At a store, a cashier stares at the couple pensively. But we know Miss Girl just jealous she's single. One night, the police barge into their home and arrest the couple for living together as an interracial couple. Richard is released the following day, but Mildred remains in custody and is told she must stay there until their court date. Unable to bear the situation, Richard returns to the station to try to bail her out, but the officer threatens to jail him if he comes back. Feeling powerless, he is forced to move his belongings out of the house. A few days later, Mildred is bailed out of jail by her father. When she returns home, she learns that Richard had to move out to avoid arrest. That night, he visits her and reassures her that he has hired one of the best lawyers to help resolve the matter in court. Days later, the lawyer Frank advises them to plead guilty to have their jail sentences suspended. However, to remain married, they must agree to leave Virginia for 25 years. This is the best lawyer they got? With no other option, they accept the deal. In court, the charges are read and they plead guilty. Judge Bazile then issues a ruling that prohibits them from living together in Virginia. After the verdict, they painfully say goodbye to their loved ones and move to Washington, D.C. to stay with Mildred's distant relatives, Alex and Laura. Mildred isn't too keen on living in a very active neighborhood. She used to the rural life. They stay in Washington for some time, but Mildred feels unhappy. She had always imagined that Richard's mother would be the one to deliver their baby. Feeling powerless against the law, Richard finally gives in to Mildred's wish, and they return to Virginia. To avoid drawing attention, he makes sure they're never seen together, and the couple live in secret. Eventually, they reach home safely. Mildred's sister thanks Richard for risking so much to bring her back, and the couple stays with her until Richard's mother delivers their baby. That night, Richard quietly thanks his mother for her help, but she admits that, despite being kind to everyone, she doesn't approve of his marriage. I wasn't going to say nothing about your fatback Oz. That turkey fat neck of yours needs to go. The following day, the family enjoys the new bundle of joy. However, the police show up at their home since some unemployed whitey has reported them. Richard quickly tells Mildred to call the lawyer, then steps outside to confront the officers. He lies, saying his wife isn't home, but one of the policemen threatens to split his head in two. Eventually, Mildred appears, and the police take the couple directly to court, as Judge Bazile happens to be present that day. They don't spend the night in jail and are immediately tried. As the judge prepares to pass his verdict, their lawyer arrives and pleads for leniency. He admits that it was his mistake to tell them they could safely return to Virginia for the birth of their child. Judge Bazile accepts the explanation and pardons them. After the trial, the lawyer warns them never to return to Virginia again unless they want to end up in jail. They move back to Washington and live there for several years, eventually having more children. One day, Mildred's sister visits, and during their time together, they think about the past. The visit reignites Mildred's longing for home, and she feels guilty that her children are growing up feeling confined. Around this time, she learns about the growing civil rights protests across America, including one where about 100,000 people marched toward the Lincoln Memorial, demanding equal rights for interracial couples. Encouraged by Laura, Mildred considers writing a letter to Bobby Kennedy, the Attorney General, to share her story. After some thought, she sends the letter. A few days later, she receives a call from Bernard Cohen, a lawyer referred by the American Civil Liberties Union, offering to help with their case. He requests a meeting with her and Richard, and Mildred agrees to get back to him. Before hanging up, she mentions that they broke as hell and can't afford legal representation, but Cohen assures her that the ACLU will cover the costs. Later that day, she tells Richard about the lawyer who contacted her and explains that he's willing to take their case for free. They meet with Cohen, who explains that their case has the potential to reach the Supreme Court. Richard, uncertain, asks why it has to go that far and wonders if it could simply be resolved by speaking with Judge Bazile. Cohen disagrees, stating that no judge in Virginia would accept such a resolution and that their best and possibly only chance is through the Supreme Court. Since the original case happened years ago, Cohen suggests an unorthodox strategy. return to Virginia and get arrested, which would reopen the case. Richard is strongly against the idea, and they leave the office disappointed. As time passes, one of their children walks into traffic and gets ran over. Because of this, Mildred Dunn had it living the urban lifestyle. When Richard comes home, he finds their belongings packed downstairs. He confronts Mildred and learns that she has decided to move back to Virginia in the country. Seeing her determination, he agrees, and they return to Caroline County separately. Richard's friend Raymond later visits them and tells them about a property on the outskirts owned by his cousin that's available for rent. Richard likes the idea, and they move in. Once the family is settled, Mildred writes to Cohen to remind him of their case. Cohen receives the letter and reaches out to Chet Antio for help. A meeting is arranged where Cohen is introduced to Phil Hirschkopf, a brilliant civil rights attorney. They discuss the Lovings case and its potential to overturn anti-miscegenation laws across the country. Afterward, Phil cautions Cohen that the case is delicate. By appealing, they risk the possibility of the Lovings being sent to prison. Despite the risk, Phil urges Cohen to file a constitutional complaint, which would compel Judge Bazile to reopen the case and present it before a federal judge. They schedule a follow-up meeting for Monday. Phil also reminds Cohen that, with his limited experience in constitutional law, he's about to take on a case that could alter the U.S. Constitution. Raymond drives to Richard's house to deliver the news from Cohen, but the reckless speed of his driving startles Richard, who is constantly anxious about being caught by the popo. Once he calms down, Raymond delivers the message, and the couple later meets with the lawyers. They learn that Judge Bazile has ruled against their appeal, but the language in his written opinion is a useful tool that can be used to escalate the case to the Supreme Court. However, they must first appeal to the state court. If that court also rules against them, they'll finally have the grounds to approach the Supreme Court. In anticipation, Life magazine requests to do a profile on the couple because it finna go viral. The Lovings agree. The magazine sends reporter Gray Valet to interview them. He arrives and, in a casual moment, unintentionally advises Richard on how to increase the speed of his car. During the visit, Gray forms a warm rapport with the couple, capturing a powerful image of Richard lying on Mildred's lap as they watch TV. A quiet but intimate portrait that speaks volumes. They later face the Virginia State Court but lose the case, which allows them to appeal to the Supreme Court. The couple returns to their home in Virginia, and one day Richard finds a newspaper on his vehicle with a photo of them in it. Paranoid, he wonders if someone is threatening him. On his way home, he notices a truck following behind and becomes paranoid. He floors the gas and rushes home, constantly checking to see if the vehicle is still on his tail. Once home, he immediately calls for his daughter and tells her to contact Raymond and ask their neighbors for some guns. Seeing how distressed he is, Mildred comes outside to check on him, but he sends her back inside. Richard and Raymond wait outside until nightfall, and Raymond tries to calm him down, suggesting that the truck might have just been headed for a fishing trip. Noticing how anxious Richard is, he gently advises him to take it easy. Later, Richard installs a telephone in their home. A few days afterwards, some journalists arrive to interview Mildred in preparation for the Supreme Court case. When Richard sees them in the house, he privately tells Mildred that he doesn't want them there. She explains that it's important and that these people are trying to help them. She resumes the interview, and Richard joins them, though he quietly observes from the sidelines. Meanwhile, Richard uses a tip he got from Gray Valet and applies it to one of his racing vehicles, which ends up winning by a large margin. That night, while drinking with friends, Virgil tells Richard that his situation isn't as bad as it seems. Many black men wish they had his privilege. All his troubles could end simply by divorcing Mildred. Richard returns home upset and apologizes to Mildred for all the pain he's caused her over the years. He admits he's tired of the legal battle, which has dragged on for 10 years, and keeps assuring her that he can still take care of her and their family. During the winter, their lawyers visit and bring good news. The Supreme Court has agreed to hear their case. The state of Virginia will, of course, defend its laws by saying it is unfair to bring mixed-race children into the world, arguing that such children are bastards in the eyes of the law. Pained by the revelation, Richard decides not to attend the hearing. The lawyers try their best to convince the couple, but Mildred says she'll only go if her husband does. Outside, Cohen speaks with Richard and explains that the Supreme Court hears only 1 out of every 400 cases. This is their chance. Still, Richard remains firm. When Cohen asks what he would like him to say to the justices on his behalf, Richard simply says that he should tell the judge he loves his wife, but not enough to go to court for her. The day of the hearing arrives and the lawyers head to the Supreme Court without the Lovings. They present the case, asking the court to consider the full weight of the laws against interracial marriage. Phil emphasizes that this is about more than just criminal law. It affects the legitimacy of children, housing, inheritance, and many other fundamental rights. When it's Cohen's turn to speak, he opens by asking what harm interracial marriage poses to the state of Virginia or its people. He declares that marriage is a fundamental right, and before concluding, he shares Richard's message. "Tell the judge I love my wife." Days later, as the children play outside, Mildred receives a phone call from Cohen. He tells her they've won. The Supreme Court has ruled in their favor. Their case has changed U.S. law, and several southern states are already beginning to adopt the new legal precedent. With their freedom finally secured, the family can live openly in Virginia. Richard returns to the land he bought years ago and fulfills his promise. He builds a house for Mildred, the home they always dreamed of. Unfortunately, 7 years later, Richard was killed by a drunk driver, and Mildred never remarried. What an incredible true story. What did you guys think of this one?
Subscribe to watch more videos like this. Turn on notifications. And leave a like, it really helps the channel out. Thank you for watching.